When a joking question in a Navy cafeteria turned deadly serious, every SEAL in the room learned that legends don't die, they just become dads. What the Admiral discovered about Iron Ghost that day changed the way the entire base saw heroes forever. The Navy base cafeteria hummed with the morning rush. The clatter of trays, the laughter of young recruits, and the low chatter of officers grabbing coffee before another long day. But in the far corner, apart from the noise, sat a man who didn't quite fit in anymore. Jake Mercer. A single father, former Navy pilot, now a base mechanic. His once broad shoulders were still strong beneath a faded leather jacket, and his hands, though scarred and oil-stained, moved with a gentle precision as he cut pancakes for his 6-year-old daughter. Lily, she was his world now, with her messy blonde ponytail and syrup-smeared smile. Her laughter was the only mission that mattered. Life had become simple, quiet, and Jake intended to keep it that way. After all, he'd promised her mother, before the cancer took her, that he would raise Lily in peace, far from the roar of engines and the chaos of war. The base was just another job now, fixing old helicopters, changing fuel lines, listening to the whine of engines that once sang to his soul. The younger mechanics respected him, though few knew much about his past. To them, he was just Mr. Mercer, the quiet guy who knew more about flight systems than the manuals themselves. Jake liked it that way. No attention, no questions. Just work, home, and his little girl. That morning, however, peace didn't last long. The chatter in the cafeteria dimmed suddenly, like the air itself was holding its breath. Jake didn't need to look up to know why. He could hear the heavy, synchronized steps, the crisp rhythm of boots. A group of Navy SEALs had entered, their presence commanding immediate respect. Behind them strode a man whose authority filled the room without a word, Admiral Rhodes, a living legend. His uniform was a gallery of ribbons and medals, polished so bright they caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every recruit straightened, every officer stiffened, everyone except Jake. He continued slicing Lily's pancakes as she chattered about a stray puppy she'd seen near the hangar. The syrup on her cheek glistened as she smiled up at him, and Jake leaned forward, gently wiping it away with a napkin. It was such a small, tender moment, but it stood out sharply against the silence that had fallen across the room. The Admiral's gaze caught it. He frowned slightly, studying the man who sat there like he didn't belong to this world of order and hierarchy. "You there," he called out, his voice carrying across the hall, deep and commanding. "You're not in uniform. You a guest or one of ours?" Jake looked up calmly, meeting the Admiral's eyes without flinching. "Used to be one of yours, sir," he replied with a faint smile. "Now I just fix your choppers." Rhodes' brow arched, amused. "Used to be, huh? What's your call sign, son?" The question came with a smirk, the kind officers gave when they didn't expect much of an answer. The SEALs around him chuckled quietly. Jake didn't speak at first. He looked down, brushed Lily's hair aside, and then lifted his gaze again, calm but with a flicker of something steel behind his eyes. His voice, when it came, was low and even. "Iron Ghost." The laughter stopped. The air seemed to crackle. Admiral Rhodes's face shifted, amusement draining away, replaced by stunned recognition. The entire cafeteria went silent, the name hanging there like thunder waiting to break. And just like that, the ghost of Jake Mercer's past came back to life. For a long moment, no one moved. The cafeteria, once filled with chatter and laughter, felt frozen in time. The name Iron Ghost hung heavy in the air like smoke after an explosion. Admiral Rhodes's smirk faded, replaced by disbelief, then something that looked like respect. He stared at the man in the worn jacket, as if seeing him for the first time. "You said, Iron Ghost?" he repeated, but softer this time, like the words carried a weight only he could understand. Jake Mercer simply nodded once, calm as ever. Around them, the SEALs exchanged uneasy glances. They'd heard the name, whispered in training rooms, buried in after-action reports, told like a myth soldiers passed down in the dark. The Iron Ghost wasn't supposed to be real. He was the phantom pilot who'd flown into hell and come back when everyone else was dead. A ghost who saved a SEAL team lost behind enemy lines during Operation Black Tides, a mission so classified that even those who survived were told never to speak of it again. Admiral Rhodes' voice broke the silence, quiet but firm. "You flew with Task Force Shadow," he said, more statement than question. "Operation Black Tides." The moment he spoke the operation's name, the nearby soldiers stiffened. That mission had been sealed in black folders and filed away in the kind of archives no one dared open. Jake's eyes flicked up, steady but distant. "We got them home," he said simply. The Admiral took a slow breath, as if trying to process a ghost standing in front of him. You saved my men that night," he said. The words trembled slightly, the voice of a man remembering something that never stopped haunting him. "They said no one could have made it through that storm. No radar, no comms. Enemy fire on every approach." Jake looked away, his jaw tightening as flashes of memory passed. Tracer fire streaking through rain, the cockpit shaking under gunfire, the sound of his own breath echoing in his helmet as he guided a broken bird through the dark. "Doesn't matter how bad it was," he murmured. "They were counting on me. You don't leave anyone behind." The SEALs were silent now. Some stared in awe, others in disbelief. The Iron Ghost, the man who'd become a legend, was standing there feeding pancakes to his daughter. Admiral Rhodes stepped closer, the weight of realization pressing on him. "Why didn't you ever come forward? You could have had honors, promotions, a career." Jake cut him off with a faint, almost tired smile. "Because the ones who didn't come home deserve the medals more than I ever did. And I promised someone I'd stop flying into battles." He glanced at Lily, who looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes, her little hand clutching his sleeve. "Now my only mission is her." The Admiral's throat tightened. In that moment, every title, every medal on his chest felt small compared to the quiet strength in front of him. Jake Mercer wasn't just a soldier. He was the kind of man who made legends look human. The silence that followed was heavy, reverent. No one dared speak. Even the youngest recruit understood they were standing in the presence of something sacred. Admiral Rhodes gave a slow nod, his voice barely above a whisper. "Iron Ghost, you were never supposed to exist." Jake's faint smile returned. "That's the point, sir." And with that, the legend who had disappeared into classified files was standing there in plain sight. A father, a mechanic, and a ghost who refused to haunt the past. The silence in the cafeteria was deafening. Forks lay untouched, coffee cups went cold, and every young SEAL in the room stared at Jake Mercer like they were seeing a ghost step out of a war story. Admiral Rhodes stood motionless, his decorated chest rising and falling slowly as the truth sank in. The man sitting before him, the quiet mechanic who shared pancakes with his daughter, wasn't just another veteran. He was the Iron Ghost, the phantom pilot whose name had been spoken with awe and disbelief for years. Rhodes took a step closer, his boots echoing against the tiled floor. Jake didn't move, didn't flinch. He just kept his hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder, calm as if the whole room hadn't stopped breathing. "You were never recognized," Rhodes said finally, his deep voice carrying across the hall. "That mission was sealed, buried so deep no one was supposed to know what really happened." Jake nodded slightly. "That's the way it needed to be, sir." The Admiral's brow furrowed. "You flew through a lightning storm that shut down every radar for miles. Enemy fire on both sides. You brought my men home when even I had given up hope." His voice cracked on the last word. "You should have been given the Medal of Honor." Jake sighed, looking down at the table. "With all due respect, Admiral, medals don't mean much to the families of the ones who didn't make it. I did my job. That's all." Across the room, a young SEAL whispered, "That's the guy from Black Tides." "The Iron Ghost?" Another nudged him, wide-eyed. "They said he disappeared after the mission." Their voices were hushed, reverent, as if afraid to disturb something holy. Rhodes's eyes softened as he studied Jake. The man's face was calm, but behind his eyes lived memories that no medal could erase, the kind that stayed with soldiers long after the world stopped thanking them. Rhodes took another step forward, his voice quieter now, almost personal. "You didn't just save my men, son. You saved me. They were my responsibility. When the chopper came out of those clouds that night, I saw your call sign flash on the comms for half a second before it went dark again. I never forgot it. Jake's throat tightened, but he said nothing. Lily tugged on his sleeve, her small voice cutting through the tension. "Daddy, are you in trouble?" she asked softly. Jake smiled and shook his head. "No, sweetheart. Just talking to the Admiral." That small moment of tenderness seemed to break something in Rhodes. The towering officer, 4 stars on his shoulders, decades of command behind him, straightened his back, took one deliberate step forward, and to everyone's utter disbelief, he saluted. The room froze. Every SEAL, every recruit, every officer stood paralyzed as Admiral Rhodes held that salute with perfect precision. Not as a superior officer, but as a soldier paying respect to another. Jake blinked, stunned. Slowly he rose from his seat, his daughter watching wide-eyed as he returned the salute. No one dared breathe. The entire cafeteria stood in stunned silence as a legend saluted another. When Rhodes finally lowered his hand, his voice carried the weight of 1,000 missions. "Men like you don't retire, son. You just change uniforms?" Jake nodded respectfully. "Maybe so, sir. But this is the only one I wear now." He glanced down at his oil-stained jacket, then at Lily's smiling face, and in that moment, every soldier in the room understood. Heroism wasn't always about medals or missions. Sometimes it was about keeping a promise, raising a child and finding peace after war. The salute that morning became legend before the sun had even set. By evening, whispers of iron ghosts spread through every corner of the base, from the flight deck to the barracks, from the youngest recruit to the oldest officer. Everyone wanted to know about the man who had once vanished into the clouds and returned as a father with grease on his hands and love in his heart. But Jake Mercer didn't care for the stories. He wasn't chasing glory. He was chasing peace. After leaving the cafeteria, he went back to the hangar, the same as always, and got to work tightening bolts, checking hydraulics, and teaching his daughter how to hold a wrench properly. For Jake, the war had ended long ago. What remained was the quiet mission of fatherhood, one he took more seriously than any operation the Navy had ever assigned him. Days passed, but the cafeteria incident didn't fade. Admiral Rhodes visited him often after that. Sometimes it was official, an inspection, a question about flight mechanics, but other times it was just the Admiral stopping by to talk. He'd stand in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching Jake guide Lily through small tasks like checking oil levels or wiping down panels. "You're good with her," Rhodes would say once. Jake smiled faintly. "She's my co-pilot." And every time the Admiral heard those words, he couldn't help but feel humbled, because he realized that heroes didn't always belong in uniforms. Sometimes they were just dads trying to build a quieter kind of courage at home. One afternoon, Rhodes came by with a file under his arm. "We're starting a new training initiative," he said, "for air rescue pilots. We'd like to name it Project Iron Ghost." Jake looked up from under the wing of a helicopter, brow furrowed. "You don't need my name on anything, Admiral. Name it after the ones who didn't come home. They earned it." Rhodes hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You really don't want any recognition, do you?" Jake's answer was simple. Recognition fades. Character doesn't. Later that evening, Jake and Lily walked along the runway, the sunset painting the sky in gold and crimson. She skipped beside him, humming softly, her tiny hand wrapped around his. "Daddy," she said suddenly, "were you really a hero?" Jake stopped and crouched beside her, his eyes soft with love and memory. "No, sweetie," he said quietly. "I just helped my friends find their way home." She thought for a moment, then smiled. "That's what heroes do," Jake chuckled, tousling her hair. "Maybe. But the only mission I care about now is getting you home safe every night." As they reached the end of the runway, a jet roared overhead. A familiar sound that once made Jake's pulse race. Now it only brought peace. He looked up, saluted quietly, then turned back toward the hangar with his daughter. The world would remember Iron Ghost as a legend, a phantom of the skies, a man who defied death to save others. But Jake Mercer didn't live in that legend anymore. He lived in every laugh his daughter made, in every promise he kept, and in every sunrise that came after the storm. For the first time in years, the ghost had found his rest, not in the clouds, but right here on the ground, where heroes learn to be fathers. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more emotional, military-inspired stories of courage, sacrifice, and redemption. Only on Drew Daily Stories. Because heroes aren't always on the battlefield, sometimes they're just dads doing their best.